It's time for CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Find us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play Music, YouTube, and TuneIn. The easiest thing to do is tell Alexa or Siri to play CBJ in 30. Here's your host, Bob McElligott.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you've earned here tonight. One game. If we played them 10 times, they might win 9. But not this game. Not tonight. Tonight, we skate with them. Tonight, we stay with them. And we shut them down because we can.
You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
The greatest hockey game ever played. February 22nd, 1980, Lake Placid, New York, as part of the Olympic Winter Games. Team USA knocks off the Soviet Union by the score of 4-3 in what will forever be known as the Miracle on Ice. We celebrate it this week. Welcome to CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. I'm Bob McElligott. Coming up in today's show, you're going to hear from two men that had different roles in that gold medal winning Olympics. One is just a regular guy like you and me, someone that was so inspired by the Americans' victory over the Soviets that he got in his car and drove to Lake Placid to be there for the gold medal game against Finland. When that game was over, he was on the ice, draping his own American flag around the shoulders of goaltender Jim Craig in what has become an iconic photo. The other has been the architect of Stanley Cup winning teams in the NHL. But prior to that, he was the assistant coach for Herb Brooks on that 1980 team. I'm talking about Craig Patrick, who watched as Brooks took a group of college players, some that really didn't like each other, and found for them a common bond, and watched them grow and develop and eventually become immortal in the game of hockey. Today's show is brought to you by Telhio Credit Union, where they take your business banking personally. You can experience the personalized service that you've been looking for with their business banking team at Telhio Credit Union. Telhio is open to everyone in central and southwestern Ohio, and they are federally insured by NCUA. After Craig Patrick was the general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, he spent a couple of years as a special assistant to general manager Scott Housen with the Blue Jackets. It was at that time I got a chance to meet Craig Patrick, and for a boy that had grown up outside of Pittsburgh and watched what Craig did with the 1991 and 92 Penguins, he was a legend. When he came to Columbus, I found out that he's just a regular person like everyone else, but a very special person, a very knowledgeable person, a very good person, and someone that I feel that I can call a friend. Just a couple of weeks ago, Craig Patrick was at Nationwide Arena, and we were talking in between periods, and he mentioned that he was going to Las Vegas to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the 1980 gold medal winning team. I asked him if he would mind talking with me about that experience and reliving what happened to him 40 years ago. He was kind enough to agree, so here's the story. Craig, can you believe that it has been 40 years since Team USA beat the Soviets in the 1980 Winter Olympic Games at Lake Placid?
Well, it does seem like a while ago, but memories are still fresh in my mind. So it's awesome.
And the thing about the memories for you is it was not just the one game. It was a very long period of time, from selecting the team to training the team to playing the exhibition games that you played before the Olympic tournament. Just that whole grind. As you look back on it 40 years later, how much fun was it, and how much of a learning experience was it?
Well, yeah, it was a grind. We were 7 months. I was Herb Brooks' roommate for 7 months. That's a grind in itself. But anyway, I was young, 33 years old, and just finishing my playing career. So to go through that in such a condensed period of time was a great learning experience. It gave me a jump start on my career. And, I mean, winning helped a whole lot, but having that experience once I got into management and with the Rangers it was great to have that experience going forward.
Now, not everybody listening to this was alive in 1980 and saw that game and knows or saw firsthand what that team did, but a lot of people have seen the movie Miracle. So I've got to ask you, how close to reality was that Disney movie, especially the parts when it comes to selecting the team and the rigorous training that you guys put that team through?
Right. I think Disney did a great job telling the story. They changed a few little things in it, but the storyline itself is perfect. And Herb was there for the whole directing of the movie, so you knew it wasn't going to get far off target. But the storyline, Disney did a terrific job telling the story.
When Herb Brooks asked you to be a part of that, when you became a part of that, and from the moment that he started with the selection of the team, how much was it obvious to you? You knew exactly how he was going to run things and what he was looking to do, and you knew who was going to be the good guy, who was going to be the bad guy, didn't you?
Well, the day he talked to me about being assistant coach when we were in Moscow in the World Championships. He was coaching, I was playing, I was the captain of the team. He came to me and said, "Would you be interested? I'm going to be the Olympic coach." I said, "Sure, I'll be interested." So we got back 2 weeks after we got back. He called me and said, "Okay, are you still interested?" "Yes." He said, "We'll get to St. Paul tomorrow." He was St. Paul, Minnesota. I was in Washington, D.C. I sat down with him. The first thing he said is, "Craig, the guys we're going to have on this team hate each other. They've been battling for the national championships. They're not friendly with each other. He says, the only way I know how to make them a team is for them all to dislike me, Herb. Dislike me. And Craig, you're going to have to be the guy to keep all the pieces together." That's what he told me our very first meeting. So he had a master plan that had it in place a year before we even started the training, before we started training or picking the team. But he knew who that was going to be on the team from that point on.
Knowing the plan and then watching the plan unfold and seeing it happen just the way that he predicted that it would happen, especially being a young guy that was just done playing and starting to coach, how much did that amaze you that he had that much foresight to know exactly what was going to happen and how to counter it?
I was amazed. I mean, he was a brilliant hockey guy, and I have to say I hired him several times. After that, I hired him with the Rangers. I hired him with the Penguins because he had a great hockey mind, and I admired it from the very beginning. The interesting part for me looking back was he was so sure of himself, but still insecure. Like he'd have to ask me like every 2 weeks, "Craig, you think we're still on the right path?" I mean, he'd ask me that constantly, and I'd say, "Yeah, Herbie, we're winning. We're beating every team in the Central League. We played an interlocking league games with the Central Hockey League, which is back then like the American Hockey League is today, and we were winning all these games. And the games counted for the Central League teams. It didn't count for us. It was an exhibition for us, but it counted in their standing. So they were playing for real, but we were beating them. I think our record was 16-2-2, playing the games we played with the Central Hockey League. And he'd every few weeks, "Craig, you think we're on the right path?" I said, "Yeah, Herbie, we're winning. Everything's going great." Yeah.
One of the most famous scenes in the movie is when he has the players line up after the game is over because they didn't play hard enough during the game. And in the movie, the guy playing you, is blowing the whistle over and over. How accurate is that scene? Well,
the scene is accurate, except I wasn't blowing the whistle. He was. I was negotiating with the rink manager to keep the lights on, but I failed, and he turned the lights out, and Herb kept skating him anyway. So
was that, especially when you're young like that, are you looking at that and going, "Oh my God, what's going on here"?
Well, I'd been through it.
You've been on the other side of it?
Yes, I've been on the receiving end of those before.
Yeah, we don't see those anymore. Those don't happen anymore.
Don't they? I don't know.
Talking with Craig Patrick. He, of course, was the assistant coach on the 1980 Olympic hockey team win. And the game that you played against the Soviets at Madison Square Garden before the Olympics started, and having happened what happened in that game. Now, you said Herb kept on asking you, "Are we on the right track? Are we on the right track?" Did you think you were on the right track after that game?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to that story that's probably never been told, but we had never played that Russian team. We'd played many Russian teams, but not that team. That was the Red Army team. Everybody knew they were the best in the world. We hadn't played them. So that was the first time we played them. It was Madison Square Garden. The first half of the game, we were just watching. Everybody was in awe. Like all the guys were on the ice just watching them play. So we were down 7-0 halfway through the game. We started to play the second half of the game, was 3-3 for the last half of the game. And granted, maybe the Russians let off the pedal a little bit, but still, it was 3-3. So we had that to work with going into the game that really counted in Lake Placid. So Herb used that as motivation, saying, hey, you played with him. When the time came, you played with him for 30 minutes, and we can do that again.
When you talked about how he already knew what the team was going to be, what he had to do to gel the team, what about knowing how the Russians were going to play, knowing the kind of shape that the team had to be in if they were going to be able to compete with the Russians? You talk about foresight. He had their system broken down, didn't he?
Well, Herbie spent a good part of a year in Russia prior to being named the Olympic coach. So he knew Russian systems. And as far as conditioning, we were the best conditioned team on the planet that year. Those guys worked so hard for 7 months. And Herb pushed them. They were the best conditioned hockey team. I can't speak for all teams. Well, hockey's probably the best conditioned team anyway. So they were the best conditioned athletic team on the earth that year. I can guarantee you that.
The players on that team, when it comes to this time of year, Mike Eruzione is always popping up everywhere doing interviews. He was the captain of that team, of course. Jim Craig gets talked about a lot because he was a goaltender that, didn't – I don't know if he believed in himself, but Herb did believe in him and finally got out of him what he thought that he could get out of him when he won it. But who are some of the guys that are the unsung heroes for you, guys that maybe you had some great relationships with that don't get talked about as much 40 years later?
Well, there's so many of them because that group of guys, as a group, they played over 6,000 games in the NHL. Neil Broughton, Mark Pavlich, Mark Johnson, Kenny Morrow won 4 Stanley Cups. He won a gold medal in 80, Stanley Cup in 80, and Stanley Cup 81, 82, 83. So, I mean, he's hardly talked about, but he was stalwart on our defense. Billy Baker, Davey Christian played many, many years in the NHL. I mean, we had guys that, had great careers in the NHL. We were more talented than people gave us credit for because we were young and talented. And Herb knew who he was picking for that team in May of 79. He knew it. When I sat down with him, he knew the guys he was going to have on that team, even though he had to go through a sports festival in Colorado Springs to pick the team, or pick 20. I think we picked 26 to 30 guys to go further with the team. He knew who those guys were going to be in May before they even stepped on the ice in August for the tryout.
The game against the Soviets was not the last game, and I think everybody kind of knows that, but some people forget it because that was the feature game. That was, at that time, 1979, 1980, it was, the Russians and the Americans head-to-head, and it was a really patriotic thing, but it wasn't the game that won you the gold medal. It was the game against Finland that won the gold medal, and that was a game where there were no guarantees. You don't just show up for that game and win that medal. You still had to work.
We were down 2-1 after 2 periods, and I remember going into the locker room with Herb and starting to say something, and the guys just jumped up. No way we're going to lose this game. We haven't come this far to lose to the Finns. We're gonna win this game. We went out and won 4-2, but in the locker room they were determined. This isn't going to happen. We're going to win this hockey game, and we did.
As the clock ticks down in both of those games, the game against the Soviets and then in the gold medal game, what's the feeling as a young guy that's been a part of this now, a grueling experience for months, and watching this team come together and they're about to win the gold medal? What was it like for you?
Oh, for me, it was such a feeling of gratitude that the guys won the gold medal. They deserve the gold medal. What they put in the 7 months prior to those Olympics, they deserve the gold medal.
Some of those guys from that team are now gone, but you're going to be around some of them here to celebrate the 40 years. How much you look forward to rekindling relationships and just getting as many guys as possible back in one spot for just mere moments?
Well, we've been fortunate recently because we've all been able to get together for signing pictures or whatever. So we do get together 2 or 3 times a year. So this one's going to be great. We're going to be in Las Vegas for 3-4 days and enjoying our moment in the sun again for 40 years later. It's pretty awesome.
When you guys did that at the time, did you realize that it would be the phenomenon that it was? Realize the patriotism that was being driven there? I mean, today there's social media. I mean, you can't do anything without everybody else knowing what's going on. Back in those days, I mean, the game was run on tape delay, for crying out loud. The game had already been played before most people got to see it. So did you guys realize what was going on?
We had no idea. We were living in 4 people to a trailer in the Olympic Village. No TV, no newspapers. We had no idea. The only inkling, I should have had some sort of inkling, because back then it was the Western Union days. You get telegrams, and we used to get these yellow sheets of telegrams. They'd come to, and they'd give them to me, and it was my job to post them outside our locker room on the wall. And by the end of it, our wall was pretty full of telegrams. At that point, I should have thought, hey, somebody's paying attention around this country. But we really had no idea until we went to the White House for lunch on Monday after they sent Air Force One up to pick up Eric Hayden and ourselves, our team, to go to the White House for lunch. We got off the plane at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, or D.C., wherever. It's in Maryland. And from the Andrews Air Force Base to the White House, we were in limos, first of all. Like, we're going, limos? What, really? And then all the way from Andrews Air Force Base to the White House, the route, they knew the route, so there were people lined up on both sides, 10 deep, waving flags and cheering us, and we're looking at each other like, what did we do? But at that point, it started sinking in, like we did something special.
You went on to win Stanley Cups as a general manager and be in charge of some great teams, but where does that gold medal rank for you?
Well, it's at the top. But I grew up in a professional hockey family, so winning a Stanley Cup is pretty much everything. But it's not quite as good as winning a gold medal, and that's in those circumstances.
Craig, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always great to see you when I get to. I appreciate it, and congratulations, and enjoy your time with that old team.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That is Craig Patrick. He was the assistant coach on that 1980 Olympic gold medal winning team. Now, the next man I'm going to introduce you to is someone that I met when I worked in Syracuse of the American Hockey League. Peter Cappuccilli is from Syracuse, and somehow he weaved his way into the story of that gold medal winning team. It is partly because he was inspired by the United States defeating the Soviets, and it's partly because he loves his country and the game of hockey. The night before the United States played Finland for the gold medal in those 1980 Olympic Games, Peter decided to get into his van in the dead of winter and drive 4 hours across upstate New York. He took with him an American flag that eventually would be draped over the shoulders of goaltender Jim Craig after the gold medal was secured. Here is Peter Cappuccilli's story.
Yeah, the story was that my brother-in-laws, 2 of them, Michael and Dan McCormick, they both worked at the Olympics. And we were fortunate enough to go back and forth up there. I think we were up 4 different times. And we had our family party that night. And we just happened to have the opportunity, after a few cocktails, to jump into my conversion van and head up at 2 o'clock in the morning with the biggest snowflakes you ever saw coming down. And there was 4 brother-in-laws and myself, and we arrived in Lake Placid right around 6 o'clock in the morning, the morning of the gold medal game against Finland.
So let's go back to before that, and obviously this had to spur you deciding to go to that. The game against the Soviets, which is, it's hard to believe 40 years have gone by. But what did that game mean to you that you decided to jump into that van and go to the gold medal game against Finland?
Well, it's interesting you ask that question, because that propelled, I think, everybody to have a little special something in their heart for these boys. That was the miracle on ice. However, I like saying that the reason, or one of the reasons, that the 1980 Hockey Olympic team gold medal and beating the Russians is so remembered is because, if you recall, our country at that time we were at an all-time low. Our morale was at an all-time low. And we were at war. The unemployment and gas prices were through the roof. Mortgage interest rates were at 14%. And those young college kids were American heroes of sorts. Not taking anything away from the military, but they were American heroes without the military uniforms, without risking their lives. And they lifted our spirits and made us all proud to be Americans at a time when the morale was just so low. And I think that's what the Russian game did. Now, if you remember correctly, what made it the miracle on ice was that we had gotten clobbered in a exhibition game in New York against the Russians. It was a week before or sometime 2 weeks before the Olympics started. And but I like saying that the semifinal game, and of course what made that miracle was because we were beat so badly. But I like to call the Finland game a mini miracle. That final game against Finland was a minor mini miracle of sorts because we were losing to Finland in the last period. And if we didn't come back to win, we wouldn't have even gotten a medal at all, as I recall. And the medal point system, I think, would not have allowed us to win a medal. But those boys came back, and they won, and we got the gold medal on top of the miracle on ice.
It's great that you tell that story about the country and where everything was and what kind of an effect it had on you, because I talked with Craig Patrick, who was the assistant coach on that U.S. team, and, you know, I asked Craig, were you guys aware of what was going on outside of Lake Placid? Were you aware of the effect you were having on the country? And Craig said, no, not really, although I guess I should have known because I was the guy that got all the telegrams every day, and we would hang them up on the bulletin board, and I should have noticed that were a heck of a lot of telegrams coming in, and it never really hit me until it was all over. So that's just a great example of how it affected just you and some of the people that you knew as to what was going on with this team.
Yeah, it really did, and I think that back in probably one of the most memorable times of the game itself and that time was when the clock was running down and I was standing on the dashboard with the flag draped over the glass, yelling to Jim Craig in the crease, 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds. And I'm yelling to him to come and get the flag, and he's nodding that it'll be over to get it. And once the game was over, the crowd just jumped and caved in on him and surrounded him, boxed him right in. So the emotions just took over. So proud, so happy to be an American, so thankful to these kids that I just jumped over the glass with the flag and draped them with it and said, thanks, buddy. You made us all proud.
Now, did you have that flag with you the entire time? Was the flag in the van? Did you get the flag when you got there? Where did the actual flag come from? How did you have it at the game?
Well, the flag flew over one of our condominium developments at Village Green out in Baldwinsville in Syracuse, and it was all part of the ploy. I said to my wife in the morning, I said, after we beat the Russians the next day, I said, we're going. I said, your family's all going to be here tonight. Your two brothers are up in Lake Placid. My brother's up there with them. My cousin Ricky's up there with them. My cousin Mark's up there with them. I said, this is premeditated. We're going up tonight. So around 11 o'clock, while we're all having a ball in our family room, I went downstairs and got the flag, the American flag that flew over our condominium project. And it was a little tattered, and we would put them out to storage once they got a little tattered. And I happened to keep this one. It was a monster flag, and I brought it upstairs, hung it on the fireplace, and we're all chanting USA. And next thing you know, my brother-in-laws and myself were in the van at 2 a.m, and our wife said, yeah, we'll see in about 15 minutes. You'll go around the block with the snowstorm. But we didn't. We just persevered. And what was really funny was that we were about 2 blocks away from our house, and I mean the snowflakes, I remember like it was yesterday, were just huge. And it was blinding. And everybody fell asleep in the van. I said, I'm not turning around. And we went up. It took us about 4 hours and 15 minutes, and we were very fortunate that where there was a Y in the road, as you come into Lake Placid, and the parking had to go to the right, spectators, but to the left were delivery trucks, and I happened to have a white van, conversion van, that you couldn't tell if it was a delivery truck or a conversion van. And at the checkpoint, they just waved me through, and we ended up parking right in front of the arena. So it made it easy. We walked up to my brother-in-law's house. My brother and my two cousins were sleeping on the floor, and woke them up. It was about 6:30 at that time, and we proceeded to get involved in all the early morning excitement and get into the arena.
What time of the day was that game played against Finland?
10 o'clock, as I recall.
So you didn't have a lot of time to kill, obviously. You had zero sleep, obviously. But that's all adrenaline at that point, right?
It was all adrenaline at that point, and it was all adrenaline after the game, and it was all adrenaline as we drove home. But celebrating in the street was like something I've never experienced in my life, and I don't think I ever will. The joy, the excitement, the thrill of victory was just, and you could tell everybody was just so proud to be an American and to enjoy the moment during the probably one of the worst times in history for morale in our country.
Talking with Peter Cappuccilli, his flag was the one draped over the shoulders of Jim Craig after Team USA won the gold medal in the 1980 Winter Olympics. You said earlier about people, just storming the ice. You're used to seeing people storming the field in football games, storming the court in a basketball game. It's not too often people find their way onto the ice. What was that scene like to be out there amongst just a sea of humanity?
Well, first of all, you're right, because it's a big jump over the glass onto the ice. As a matter of fact, I cut my hand going over the ice, and there was blood, and there is blood to this day, stained on the flag itself. And it was thrilling. It was just, I don't know, I'm not going to say I was crying, but the emotion of being there at that moment, and again, I don't mean to keep repeating myself, when our country's morale was at an all-time low, when we had these young college kids that boosted all of America's hopes and dreams, and it was spectacular. And I think that's what was most impressive, was how these kids made us all proud to be Americans at a low time in our country's history.
And that was the beauty of the whole thing, wasn't it, Peter? I mean, these were college kids that were, they weren't superstars. It wasn't like the Olympics of today. It wasn't the best of the best and the major league stars or the NHL stars that were playing. I mean, these were kids that were relatively unknown except for at the schools where they played, and they all came together to make this happen.
You're right. And as we all remember, Russia had professionals. They were trained professionals to win these games. And I think that clearly demonstrates what America's about. We didn't need professionals at that time. We just needed big-hearted, hard-working college kids to show that what America's made of. And that's what the thrill of it was, and that's what we were all so proud of.
So 40 years after the fact, where is that American flag that was draped over the shoulders of Jim Craig?
Well, I said many times in many interviews, I deflect the attention with draping him with the flag because they're the ones that deserve all the credit. And Jim Craig, I gave him that flag at, I think it was 1998 American Hockey League All-Star Game when it was played at the War Memorial in Syracuse, New York. It was a cool time because Jim was either the honorary captain or the honorary coach for one of the teams. And I got to drape him and his 13, 14-year-old son right there at our hometown and tell him, Jim, this belongs to you, not to me. You deserve it. You earned it. You and those boys. Thank you for all you did. And I gave it to him. I gave it to him at that game.
Was it interesting to come back all that time later and be able to actually have a conversation with this guy, the guy that you were just trying to call to the glass to come get the flag initially, to actually talk to him about the experience, about what it meant to you as a person, all of those things?
It really did, and I think it showed me clearly at that point what a humble hero he was. Talking to him and his lovely wife, Charlene, you would never know the hero that he was. He's just a very humble, they're good people. And we had the good fortune of going to dinner with him and spending time in the arena together. And he gave me a hockey stick and a photo with the flag, as you remember it, draped down his stick looking for his dad in the stand. He gave me his warm-up jacket, and every single item, all three of those, said in his humble way, to my good friend Peter, thanks for making one of the most memorable moments in sports history. So that speaks volumes about him. He's telling me that I helped make one of the most memorable moments in sports history when they did all the work, and they deserve all the credit. I had nothing. I just had the emotions caught up and jumped over that glass like any American would at the time, feeling so good and so proud.
40 years after the fact, Peter, you now have grandchildren. How often do you tell this story, or do you just tell it when people like me call you every, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years?
Well, it's funny that you asked Stephen Medeiros and Pete Stroman, my two oldest grandsons. They love telling the story. They love watching Miracle on Ice. And most recently, the Discovery Channel did a story of sports detectives. We're the first episode. And Jimmy and I, Craig and I, had the good fortune to be on that show. It was a great documentary. And the kids show it and play it all the time. They'll come over to the house, or we'll go over to their house. And Pete and Steven, they love putting it on and just talking about it and remembering it through my eyes.
And you, of course, you're a big hockey fan, and that's where I had the opportunity to meet you in Syracuse when I worked with the Crunch when they were affiliated with the Blue Jackets. And hockey's still a big part of your life, isn't it?
Yeah, hockey's great. Vance Lederman and Jim Shirosi and, of course, Howard Dogan have just done an unbelievable job keeping hockey so strong in Syracuse. We celebrated our 25th anniversary last year, and we still get the same crowds we did the first couple of years. They've made some great decisions over the years to make it as popular as it is. And you might be happy to know, if you didn't know, that the wall, the blank wall, will now there's suites. There's 10 suites there, and there's a restaurant right up there, which makes us big time in little old Syracuse, New York. However, we weren't always little old Syracuse, New York. We had the NBA champions in 1952, which are the Philadelphia 76ers today. It used to be the Syracuse Gnats, and of course, we had the Yankee farm team, and we had SU football won the national championship in '59. And we had Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, Jim Brown, Larry Zonka, you name them. So little old Syracuse is still thriving with sports with the Syracuse Crunch, thanks to Vance and Jim and of course Howard.
As you were saying, little old Syracuse and all those heroes, but even though you don't consider yourself one, you hold a great spot in history in being there and draping that flag on Jim Craig. And, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about that. And, again, I know you, and I know that you're not looking for fortune or fame about talking about this, or even as you've deflected so eloquently to the athletes themselves. But you, my friend, were a part of it. Small part of it, but it is a moment in time that will never be forgotten. So thank you, and happy 40th anniversary for driving all the way to Lake Placid overnight and being part of that.
Thanks, Bob. Great talking to you. All the best to you.
So those are the stories of just two people out of the many people that were involved with that gold medal winning team back in 1980 in Lake Placid, New York. I'd like to thank Craig Patrick and Peter Cappuccilli for joining me today, and thank you for listening to the stories. And by the way, this weekend, don't be afraid to go back and relive that great moment in our country's history, in our sports history. You can either watch a real documentary or just put on the Disney movie Miracle. You heard Craig Patrick say it. It's pretty doggone accurate. and you will walk away feeling good. That'll do it for today's edition of CBJ in 30, presented by Tel Ohio Credit Union. I'm Bob McElligott. So long.